things and all kinds of other rigmarole up there in D.C., but believe it or not, there is plenty of work to do, namely for you and your taxes and your tax breaks, and who knows what we're going to get and when we're going to get it. But Mattie Duppler is with the National Taxpayer Union, and she is looking out for you, as the Taxpayers Union has legendarily done for a number of years now. By the way, Mattie, love your organization, and if you go to their website, we'll put it right up there on board there, you really do get an education about just exactly what's going on with your taxes, how much you're paying, and what needs to happen to give you some relief. But Mattie, thanks again for all that. So what are you looking at? What are we going to see? And what are the concerns among some people that their taxes are actually going to go up?
Right. So as you said, tax reform is the one thing that's actually making its way through the process in D.C. And I remain very optimistic that this is something that can get done before the end of the year. Last night, the Senate appointed its conferees to the tax reform conference. So that's where the Senate and the House will now meld their two bills together to produce a product that will hopefully get through both chambers and then to the president's desk before the end of the year. You know, there's some differences between the House and the Senate bills, but they are the same in principle. And two main things are accomplished by these bills. One is dropping our corporate income tax rates, the highest in the world right now at 35%, keeps American businesses uncompetitive and leaves our workers to try and compete with businesses that are competing or that are working at much lower levels across the globe, really. And then it delivers a middle-class tax cut. There's a lot of relief packed into this bill for individuals, both on the House and the Senate side. And I think that will be borne out in the conference committee. You know, if you look at both the House and the Senate bills, there is income tax relief built in at every single level in these bills. And that's something that's far more expansive than anything that we have seen come out of Congress in the last several years. And I think really sets the tone for what the final product will look like.
And you all are pretty conservative when it comes to these kinds of issues. I mean, you're sticklers for what is progress when it comes to tax cuts. So the fact that this particular plan meets your approval is, I think, a good thing, and people need to pay attention to. But let's face it, you're probably like I am, and at the Taxpayers Union, people are complaining that it's going too far, but a lot of us think it's not going far enough.
Sure. Oh, and listen, there's been a lot of ink spilled about what's coming out of the tax code, and people have really, I would say opponents have really done a nice job of trying to paint that as a problem for the average taxpayer, when really the opposite is true. Right now, the tax code functions as something that really allows people who have a lot of money, a lot of accountants, a lot of lawyers to profit from it. The average American who doesn't have all of that at their disposal is severely hampered by the tax code. So getting rid of a lot of tax credits and deductions is actually a step forward for the middle class. Something that has really been lost in the debate, too, that I like to remind people of, is that only 30% of this country uses those credits and deductions. The vast majority of tax filers take the standard deduction. So with 70% of the country filing with a standard deduction, they're going to see the benefit of that standard deduction going up. And in both the House and the Senate bills, that standard deduction is doubled. So that's something that real Americans will feel in their pocketbooks right away. And especially if this bill gets done before the end of the year, those withholding tables can change, and Americans can see that impact starting in their paychecks right away.
And Mattie, also, the disappearance of the AMT is a big deal. I know for some people, they don't really know how that works, but there are a lot of people who clearly have been stung by that thing over the years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and something too with the AMT, which is kind of interesting, is that what the AMT does is essentially a second rate structure. So for people who qualify for the AMT, they have to calculate their taxes as everyone else does. Then they have to calculate them again against the AMT tax code, and they have to pay whichever one is higher. Now, the AMT tends to increase people's tax liability because it restricts the number of credits and deductions that they can take. One of those is the state and local tax deduction, which of course has gotten a lot of play, especially from politicians in blue states saying that's going to raise taxes on people. But really, the people it raises taxes on are the high income earners, because they're the only people who qualify for using that deduction. But a lot of them still lose it under that AMT. So getting rid of that AMT is crucial in order to provide tax relief. But I do think it's funny that isn't mentioned by the folks who are saying we need to keep the state and local tax deduction. They are not recognizing the fact that the people they're saying who need that deduction deduction actually don't get to claim it because of the AMT.
Yeah, and the idea somehow that this is simply something that is raising taxes, really the people who are saying that are a lot of these people in those blue states with high state taxes. But I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to be unsympathetic, but the bottom line is that's really not the federal government's problem. These people need to go back to their states and say, hey, our taxes are too high.
Totally. I absolutely agree. You've already seen even some of these politicians in these states. They're saying that they're a little nervous about tax reform passing. You know, in New Jersey, a bunch of politicians were giving quotations to reporters about how they had to rethink their tax and budget plans because they've been predicated on the notion that their taxpayers would be inoculated from bad tax policy. The more that we get rid of the ability for states to hide behind the code, the better it is for all taxpayers. Taxpayers in these states like New Jersey, New York, California, they have not had to feel the effect of reckless politicians. And frankly, it's better for them to be able to keep their politicians accountable for bad tax policy, and getting rid of the state and local tax deduction can do that.
Yeah, essentially the rest of us are the ones who are paying for them to be able to have that deduction. So, Mattie Duppler, again, you guys do great work up there. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for joining us from Washington, D.C. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Coming up next, the Weber Chevrolet heat phone. Thank you, Mattie.
Why wait?